Book 1, Chapter 29, of Short History of the Christian Church, by John Fletcher Hurst. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 29, The Expansion of Christianity. The evangelization of the nations continued with unabated zeal. Whether in persecution, or after the liberty given by Constantine, the work of missions was carried on with equal fervor. There were three such fields: 1. The poor within the central regions of the empire. 2. The population of such farther provinces as were a firm part of the dominions. And 3. Those more remote tribes which were hostile to Rome, and were awaiting a good opportunity to satisfy their hunger for conquest by feeding on the dying empire. The Church extended its boundaries by exile and all the other means employed to destroy it. Both in Rome and in the larger provincial towns, the conflict between the gospel and pagan literature was intense and uninterrupted. The doctrines of Jesus gained steadily on the most finished products of pagan thought. Wordsworth's description of the conquest of the missionary over the Druids of Britain applies equally well to the whole battlefield of three continents. Haughty the bard! Can these weak doctrines blight his transports? Whither his heroic strain? But all shall be fulfilled. The Julian spear a way first opened, and, with Roman chains, the tidings come of Jesus crucified. They came, they spread, the weak, the suffering hear. Receive the faith, and in the hope abide. When Athanasius was banished from Alexandria to northern Gaul, A.D. 335, not only did the young society in the latter country enjoy the presence of an heroic example, but the exile himself began his organizing work, and established the diocese of Treves, at that time the capital of Gaul. The powerful expansion went on rapidly everywhere. Indeed, during the period of suffering, the only safety to the Christians lay in their distance from the persecuting centres. Tertullian said defiantly to the whole Roman world, "We are of yesterday, yet we have filled your empire, your cities, your islands, your castles, your towns, your assemblies, your very camps, your tribes, your companies, your palaces, your senate. Your forum and your temples alone are left you." Antioch was the centre from which the light of the gospel radiated eastward into the distant parts of Asia, and westward through Asia Minor. The pathway reached from the shore of the Aegean Sea to the west of China, a longer line of march than Alexander had made. Jerusalem lost its hold as a centre of ecclesiastical power, and its spiritual dominion was divided between Antioch in the north and Alexandria in the south. Cappadocia and the entire coast of the Euxine Sea east of the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus were early a mission field. Colchis, Iberia, and Georgia were overspread with missionary labors. Armenia was Christianized by Gregory the Illuminator in the beginning of the 4th century. He provided that country with monasteries and seminaries, and was consecrated Primate of Armenia by Leontius, Archbishop of Caesarea. The Bible was translated into Armenian, and a large Christian literature was created. In the 3rd century, Persia had so far become evangelized that Ctesiphon became the seat of a flourishing society, and a point of departure for the expansion of Christianity further east. The doctrines of Zoroaster, it has been claimed, were attacked by a converted magician, Mobed, who, in a special work, held up to his countrymen the excellence of Christianity. He suffered martyrdom, A.D. 300, but was followed by laborers of equal ardor. Edessa, in Persia, became an important centre of Christian learning. The Nestorian Christians, who were compelled to leave the Roman Empire, took refuge here, and laid the foundations of a rich and influential Syrian literature. Missionary operations were carried along all the lines of Eastern travel. From the valley of the Tigris and the Euphrates, the indications are strong that missionaries went far into the interior of India. Bitter persecutions befell the Persian Christians in the fourth century, but they remained faithful. The Church in Africa developed with amazing rapidity. Alexandria was the literary centre for the evangelization of the entire delta of the Nile. Missions were planted along either bank, and soon extended far up towards the first cataract at Philae, and to the oases on either side of the river. Carthage, the ancient Punic capital, was intimately connected with Western Christendom. Many Christians came to both these cities, but in larger numbers to Alexandria from distant regions, where they became acquainted with the theology and life of the Church, and bore back again the fruits of their study and observation. The whole of proconsular Africa, including Getulia, Mauritania, and Numidia, whose western bounds were washed by the waves of the Atlantic, was evangelized by Roman and Carthaginian Christians. The great number of bishops in the third century, dependent on the Patriarchate of Carthage, furnishes strong evidence of the extent to which Christianity had been propagated in the whole of western Africa, and of its strong hold upon the people. At the Synod of Labis, near Carthage, a.d. 240 or 242, 90 bishops were present, while 270 bishops signed the conclusions of the Council of Carthage, a.d. 308. Abyssinia was converted through two young men, Frumentius and Nedesius, who alone survived the massacre of the members of a scientific expedition conducted by Meropius, a Syrian philosopher. About the end of the fourth century a translation of the Bible was made from the received Greek Testament of the Alexandrian Church into the old language of Abyssinia. The Abyssinian Church has always remained in connection with Alexandria, its boast being, "We drink from the fountain of the Patriarch of Alexandria." Feeble as Abyssinian Christianity is, it has preserved its existence, through an unbroken succession of Christian governors, from the fourth century to the 19th. With all its error, it may in truth be called the Waldensian Church of the Switzerland of Africa. The central field of interest was the continent of Europe. Christian missionaries continued the labors of Paul, and carried the gospel through Moesia to the Danube. Macedonia had numerous Christian societies, while even Illyricum had two dioceses. By a.d. 310, 3 bishops lived in Philippopolis, in Thrace. The contact of the Goths north of the Danube, in Dacia, with Christianity, was a most important event. It was the opening of a new field of evangelistic labor, and had the important effect of bringing the gospel into relation with the many Teutonic tribes which constituted the eastern Germany of those times. A Gothic bishop, Theophilus, was a member of the Nicene Council. It was, however, through the labors of Ulfilas, a Gothic convert to Christianity, that the gospel spread widely among his people. He invented the Gothic alphabet, brought the Goths into literary relations with Roman culture, and opened up the pathway for Christian truth into all parts of the Ostrogothic territory. In Greece, it was not Athens but Corinth which became the ecclesiastical centre of operations. Athens, however, constituted a diocese, and the third bishop resident there suffered martyrdom a.d. 179. Aquileia, at the head of the Adriatic Sea, became a point of influence for the propagation of Christianity among the peoples of the eastern Alps. Rome was the heart and hand of a vigorous and aggressive Christianity. The entire Italian peninsula had grown into episcopates. The first provincial synod was a.d. 303, but before this there had been 17 smaller synods and councils, attended by bishops of all Italy. Rome converted all Spain and Gaul into a missionary field. The Roman bishop was supreme. As early as the end of the second century, Christian societies existed throughout Spain, and by the beginning of the fourth century, churches had been established in all the Gallic provinces. Vienne was an episcopal residence, a.d. 118. Lugdunum, Lyon, about A.D. 179, and Treves in the first half of the fourth century. Christianity was at first communicated to Germany, most likely, by soldiers in the Roman army. Where colonies were planted, as provincial centres of Roman authority, the gospel soon acquired a foothold. Colonia (Cologne) became a bishopric about the end of the third century. At the same time the gospel was introduced into Rhaetia by the bishop Narcissus. Christianity was also planted far in the north, along the coast of the North Sea. The apostle to Scandinavia was Ansgar, who was born A.D. 801, and whose remarkable triumphs belong to the medieval period. It cannot be doubted that the gospel entered Britain at an early period, or about the middle of the second century. Rome, under Julius Caesar, had conquered the country and brought it into close relationship with Italy. In the Council of Arles, A.D. 314, 3 bishops from Britain signed the decrees: Eborius of Eporacum, York; Restitutus of Londinium, London; and Colonia Londoniensium, Lincoln. The location of these bishops proves that the whole of England was organized into a complete ecclesiastical system. Succat, the original name of St. Patrick, or Patricius, was born in Scotland about A.D. 400, of Christian parents of high rank. At the age of 16 he was taken captive by the pirates of the Scots, and carried to Ireland, where he was employed as a shepherd. His Confessions, written in rude style, reveal his remarkable religious history. He devoted himself to the evangelization of Ireland. Through his influence societies were planted, schools were organized, Christian literature was cultivated, and missionaries went out from that island to the continent. Columbanus, with 12 companions, went to France A.D. 580, and began a thorough evangelistic work in the neglected parts of Gaul. He maintained independence of Rome, and would not submit to her authority with respect to Easter. When people quoted to him the name of the great Leo (Lion), he replied, "Perhaps in this case a living dog may be greater than a dead lion." Gallus made Gaul the field of his labors. Willibrord, an Englishman, went to Ireland for his Christian education, and then gave his life to missionary labors among the Frisians, along the coast of the North Sea. Boniface, born near Exeter about A.D. 680, went to Germany and spent his life in that country. End of chapter 29.